You're listening to 4315, a podcast about empowering workers and exposing the union-busting industry. Presented by Labor Lab. For more information and resources about the right to unionize and how to protect it, visit laborlab.us.
My name is Drew Dzinskis. I work at MDW4 in Joliet. That's an Amazon facility. It's a fulfillment center. And I am organizing on the shop floor with other workers, building power, and trying to just make a better workplace. And one of the ways in which I do that is I've kind of given myself a platform with TikTok and built one up with co-workers as well as workers at other facilities, where I report on sort of day-to-day policy matters that workers actually have to deal with, because a lot of it's kind of ludicrous to me. And I feel like the more people know about it, the better. So TikTok's just a way to engage a broader audience. I'm kind of trying to build other social media platforms too. I didn't know anything about any of this kind of stuff when I started a TikTok channel, so I've kind of learned along the way. But it's all designed to try and help workers and give a voice to people that don't have voices, or who may not be in a position to speak out and be able to experience protections the way that somebody with a bigger public profile does or has.
And you said in one of your videos that you've experienced a year of what you called systemic methodical harassment from Amazon due to your organizing. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, and I've wondered about that. The systemic methodical harassment is just how I look at the way that their system is set up to methodically break people down. And either get you out of there, or in my opinion, try to get you onto their side in terms of a labor organizing perspective. So some of it is probably attributed to a certain level of incompetence. I do believe that. Having gone through experiences taking FMLA leave, going on short-term disability leave, having to invoke federal rights to get protection from those types of things, or get protection from what I thought was a sort of methodical just breaking. As someone close to me says, they're trying to slow walk me out the door my first year at Amazon. And I started at Amazon in August of 2019. And I just needed a job. I was a person just in need of a paycheck, like many people are. And I got along fairly well at the beginning of it. I worked within their system. I learned how to train people. I took on, I guess, what you might call leadership kind of roles, or tried to. During that process, there were things that would start happening. Like I was assigned to the exact same department for 6 months, while kind of telling the management that there were problems with this department. It was not good for me, sort of mentally or physically, and yet I continued to get plugged back into it. And the whole time I was kind of oblivious to the idea that I was a labor organizing threat. It didn't even enter my mind. But it kind of started, I think I kind of got their attention when, during peak of 2019, I got up on stage at a talent show and sang a song about getting more voluntary time off, and I set it to an old hymnal song. So, I had a room clapping and, singing and, having a good time, going along, wanting, kind of asking for more from the management. And I remember I got a few looks. I was kind of naive, I guess, kind of green about it. I just thought, isn't this something people do, Apparently that got me kind of noticed, in my opinion, and that's when things started getting kind of like, I started feeling pressure from them at a certain point to move up within their organization. And I kind of resisted that. I wasn't really interested in committing to the company. And that's when I started getting, assigned to different departments, kind of being ignored, certain problems of mine being ignored. It was all later on, I found it very suspicious, but I didn't put two and two together at the time. no wiggle room for any sort of mistakes. And that includes, in my opinion, just sort of psychological tricks and psychological sort of tactics, such as, right now, we've had issues with, there's waves of people getting written up in the parking lot for like traffic safety violations. Sometimes it doesn't even, and sometimes it doesn't make sense. And it seems like they're nitpicking people. They did that to me when I first started protesting, organizing, at my facility. They wrote me up for a stop sign violation where, you go into a parking lot, in the morning, people are moving pretty briskly. The Illinois law is that people have to make a 3-second stop. At least that's the last time I checked. When I checked the law, very few people are doing that. And nobody appreciates somebody flying around the parking lot, but I felt kind of singled out with that. That's part of the reason I put the stop sign in a lot of my TikTok videos. I don't want them to forget about that. Hearing these stories from coworkers as well, it's almost like they're going out of their way to make it an uncomfortable environment. And then you start getting into just some of their basic policies, the amount of time people can take off, the way they don't really accept medical reasons. These are stories that I hear from the shop floor on a regular basis. Oh no, I had 10 hours deducted because I had to go to the hospital.
So, in addition to what you're already describing at your own facility, have you heard anything from other facilities or even your own about some other reasons workers are organizing? Is it really just around the dignity of, being able to take care of health issues and safety issues? Or I'm just curious, like, what are some of the root causes, like, people are really rallying around to organize?
Well, everybody wants respect and dignity in the workplace.
Of course, yeah.
That should be a guarantee. Yeah, that should be assumed. And the fact that there's not in some scenarios is really disturbing and will push people to action, I believe, and does push people to action. But I also think that it's, sort of a general feeling of strain and unnecessary strain often. Working people in sort of insanely long shifts or... the 10-hour workday is really hard for a lot of people. That's a tough one for people. And having to do that 5-6 times a week, sometimes mandatorily, that soaks up a lot of your time. And when you don't have a really high wage either for doing that, it doesn't pay off the way that it should. I have yet to meet a person at Amazon who doesn't think that we should get a raise and doesn't think that's reasonable. Of course, what person doesn't want a raise? I know that's a simple one, but that's an issue that very few. I don't know a lot of people that are happy with the wage, especially considering the nature of the work. We're not working in a like retail sort of setting, like say a Walmart or a Target or something like that. We're being expected to strain physically for long periods of time, and that's a much different style of work than what we're being kind of compared to. Although I think all work is underpaid, I'd like to throw that in there. I think I think that during the Great Recession that I graduated out of college into, they set the wages low and they never really came back up, and now that's kind of coming back. But that issues I've heard at other facilities as well. Across the street from mine, it's a really nasty situation that I've heard about where there was racist graffiti written on the walls, and this was covered broadly in the news. And to my knowledge, nothing's ever really been done about it, and nobody's ever been caught, despite the fact that they know what we're doing. At one point, every 6 minutes, they knew what we were doing. They have cameras everywhere, and yet you're telling me that you can't even come up with a suspect for who, vandalized a bathroom? That just seems, strange. And so that was something that people pushed back on. And additionally, stories about people wearing Confederate flags into the facility or, shirts. That's an uncomfortable type of position for a lot of people. I'm not a fan of Confederate flags myself.
I saw that video that you posted where there was that car in the parking lot that had the Confederate flag on it.
Yeah, that's not cool, man. That's not cool to me. We're a little... I lived in Springfield for a while. I've known some Civil War historians. It still seems strange to me that you'd want to be on that side in a reenactment, but I'm not going to judge. You have freedom of speech, but I don't have to be quiet about it, So those are definitely things that are pushing people to action. And then I also think, I feel strongly that when people experience union busting, or the sort of attacks on workers, it kind of stiffens them up. I think that one of the factors that I saw and if you don't mind me talking about it, I was kind of straying from my personal experience, but also seeing how other facilities have reacted. I think at JFK 8, you've got a lot of attention there, and I was the only person I knew predicting that the Amazon labor union could win. I also handicapped the RWDSU as winnable. That was my opinion. And, when I saw how they arrested Chris Smalls twice, they were calling the police in general, they come down with a heavy hand, I feel like part of what I do with my TikTok channel, as you guys I'm sure know, is I go to other facilities and I'll petition out front. It's a way to engage the workers, and it also kind of takes the temperature of, to me, what the facility is like. And the way that management reacts sometimes, the way they react to me, I can only imagine the way that they treat the workers. I mean, at MDW2 was actually the worst of all of them. There was a real nasty incident with a very large guy from loss prevention and the police of Joliet. I mean, it ended not in an arrest, but what I found strange was that when we were doing that petitioning, more people started walking up to sign the petition. It was kind of I think that when you press down on people, they just kind of naturally begin to press back, and that's something I've seen. If that makes sense,
it does. I actually I wanted to get your opinion if you want to share it, because you had brought it up and it was one of the questions I wanted to ask you. What do you think went wrong in Bessemer, and then what do you think Staten Island got right? I mean, comparatively speaking, between the two campaigns, do you think one of them learned from the other, or what do you think?
I think first are we talking about Bessemer 1 or Bessemer 2? Because I see those as two very different races or elections, as well as seeing So it does, because at the second election at Bessemer, Alabama, you saw a significant percentage drop in the total number of votes that Amazon received, and an actual increase in the total number of votes that the union got. I mean, it was to the tune of 30% or something dropping off, and then it's still not over down there either. Technically, I mean, I'm not one to not believe in miracles. I mean, with 100 vote difference and 400 votes to be counted, roughly, give or take, that's still a nail biter. Amazon hasn't won that one yet. And something I saw on both the Bessemer campaign and the ALU campaign was significant amounts of contact with workers, one-on-one conversations with workers, often other workers talking to them. I think at ALU that was a huge difference, that they had a squad of about 20 to 30 organizers perpetually doing continuous contact with workers, worker-to-worker kind of conversations, round the clock, that gave them, one, a sort of rapid response capacity. They were able to address union busting, rumors, lies, insinuations. They were able to counter the consultants that were sent in to some degree. And I think that's only possible when you're having continuous conversations with people, which is really, to me, what a union is. It's almost like an intelligence network. People are talking to one another, and that's how you get your message out and strengthen it. So I think it helps a lot to do that. And that Bessemer, I know they were knocking people's doors. I think that's an effective strategy if you visit them at home. Some people don't like that, showing up unannounced and uninvited, but having done it, it's not a stretch to say that I've knocked up to six figures in doors, maybe more. I don't know about that, but I've knocked at least six figures worth of doors. Some people hate it, but a lot of people, they'll have a real good conversation with you at their door. If you come and you ask them to, say, join a union or vote for somebody, they give you the time of day. I know they were doing that in Bessemer, and then they were throwing up pictures with the workers at their homes or off the clock. It's a lot of work to do that, but I do believe that's what carries the day and helps you win the elections. And I also think that if you were to pursue something like the Joyce Silk strategy, where you just collect cards, it'd be the same you collect a majority of cards. This is based on, you guys know about the Joyce Silk doctrine, correct? That we moved away from in labor law.
No, honestly, I've never heard of it. Do you want to maybe explain what that is?
So the Joyce-Silk doctrine was a doctrine in labor law and sort of how the NLRA was interpreted that lasted until I want to say the late 60s, but it dropped off in the 20th century. And originally, you would be able to get, if you could collect a majority of cards and display that you could achieve a majority vote just based off of cards, they would begin negotiations. And so you didn't go through elections. In fact, I think that may be the elections seem to hurt people a lot more. And I've heard talk that the NLRB, there are signs from the NLRB they would like to return to a Joyce-Silk doctrine and take the elections out of the equation, because it's just like a 2-month period or whatever the time period is for the election itself. It's just an opportunity for the company, whatever company it is, to bludgeon the workers into saying no. That to me would be an ideal world where you could just collect cards and be able to count reliably on recognition and just the company being forced into negotiation. Some people have other views on that. Some people like an election. You give people a vote, but if it's diminishing the ability of people to form unions, if it's hurting, then I think that should be the default status, not the wailing away on workers and getting to make them miserable or inundate them with propaganda about how bad unions are. You tell somebody the same thing 10 times a day for 2 months straight. It'll probably sink in. I still think Bessemer also was a good example of how you just kind of continue to build your capacity within a facility. And I'd also like to sort of acknowledge, I want to give a little airtime, if possible, to groups like Amazonians United or United for Respect that Amazonians United has some really strong committees. And they don't necessarily unionize, but they exercise the full suite of their rights protected by the National Labor Relations Act and are able to effectively win fights for the workers and make gains for workers. And I find that the worker-run organizations are really, really effective because, as I said before, the worker-to-worker conversations. And, the idea that this is a long game and we're all going to have to keep getting up and coming back to work here. We might as well clean it up as much as possible before we even have a union. And that's kind of, I believe that's kind of the traditional way of forming unions. You want to form a consensus and a supermajority if possible before it's recognized by the law. And, at one point, there were no unions too. Or there were no legally recognized unions, and they still went on strike and they still won fights for the workers. So.
In one of the videos that you put out, you said that you thought that captive audience meetings are a form of torture. First of all, I agree with that entirely. Captive audience meetings, as somebody who's been through them, they're fucking awful. When we went through our captive audience meetings at No Evil Foods, we saw people having panic attacks. Megan left the room crying multiple times. They were awful. But based on your experiences or just the experiences you've heard from other people at Amazon, why do you feel that way?
So I think that torture, by definition, is any way that you attempt to change somebody's opinion through pain, right? Or you inflict some sort of pain or damage on people to change their opinion or get whatever desired effect you want. In this case, I would call it, a torture for the purpose of being anti-union. But you're purposely creating discomfort for people. That's the main thing. I don't go around thinking how I can hurt people. I think that's a kind of obscene way to think. And when you do it and it's condoned, captive audience meetings are, effectively, they're forced listening, forced anything, to not be free to get up and walk away if you don't want to hear something that's not, especially something that's not really relevant in some ways to your job, or that maybe you are uncomfortable with. I've never had to sit through a captive audience meeting, and I hope to God I never do, for their sake, because I don't think I'd be able to tolerate it. It may very well happen, but when you're inflicting that kind of damage on people just to get them to say vote no, being a huge fan of the democratic process, having been involved with politics, feeling that the right to vote is kind of a sacred thing, it's a sacred choice, it's an obligation and a duty. To me, the idea that you inflict pain to get somebody to vote as opposed to trying to entice or incentivize them or persuade them, that's immoral. And captive audience meetings are definitely damaging to union elections. My understanding is that in Canada, they finally put a cap on, or put an end to them, in part because it was determined that captive audience meetings were having a damaging effect on the actual formation of unions. And so they would have an effect on the elections and drive down what were higher numbers and higher levels of support after captive audience meetings come in, that the vote totals will go down. Causing discomfort is a way to effectively influence somebody's way of thinking, and that's crazy to me that that's legal and that they're allowed to do it, and inflict that kind of damage. It may not have been your dream to be working at Amazon or to be working at any company, but say you want to organize, so now it's okay for them to just wail away at you and do nasty things.
It's such a common argument that I see you responding to on TikTok, is people telling you that, well, if you don't like it there, go work somewhere else.
Leave.
And this is another common talking point used against organizers to discourage them or make them angry. And we've counted at least 5 different videos where you've addressed this. So for the 6th and hopefully final time, how would you respond to somebody saying this to you?
If I could, though, I think my position on it is the same, kind of ditto. If you don't like it, you can leave. I like democracy. I like freedom of speech. And if you want to sit there and say that I'm an idiot because I support unions, you're allowed to do that. I'm just not going to listen to you very much. And I'm not going to vote for what you say. So, I don't know that there is a response, because that's one of the more ignorant things, and it's certainly just cookie cutter, right? Everybody says it. It was one of the first ones I learned, right? And I don't mean to be, saying I talked about it 5 times makes me feel a little self-conscious about it, but it is a response to it's a cookie cutter thing, and frankly, I don't know if you ever get over it. It's just so rude. And it's also, when you see it, you can't say what once somebody says that, you can't take anything they're saying seriously. You can't give them the benefit of the doubt, especially if they're saying it to get your goat. So that's how I look at it, is once somebody says that, if you don't like it, leave. I guess if you really believe that, more power to you. But that's kind of an ignorant thing to say to somebody.
Yeah, and it's right up there with people saying things like, well, if you don't like this country, you can get out. Like, it's just reminiscent of that for me. But in some of your other videos, some of the advice you've given to organizers has been the importance of documenting everything and taking things slow when organizing a union. You've even said, like, a union is like getting married. You don't have to rush the process. Do you want to expand on this advice, and or do you have any other tips for organizers out there?
Yeah, well, hey, it's like a courtship, right? It's you have an intent to go through with it, and do you pop the question on the first date with somebody? That I think taking it slow is you have to sort of slow and steadily work at the facility. And when you're organizing your workplace, slow and steady will win the race. And you can, to a new organizer, I would say, prioritize conversations and relationships with people. The strength of relationships is what helps move things forward. And relationships take time to develop. And however you got to do that, I maintain a lot of communication lines with people at all times. I always welcome a text or a call. I always try to keep my phone on for anybody that needs me, within reason, right? But that's kind of the way I play it, is I maintain that continuous contact with people, and from that you can develop that ability to ask them to do something with you or for you, or to approve of something that you're doing. And document is very important. Document everything. If it ain't on paper, all you got is vapor. Remember that, because nothing that's said face to face with like a manager or any other agent of the company, as you might call them, is going to be, something that you can stick to. So if they tell you something, that's one thing. If they write down something, that's a whole other ball game. In a big facility, become more aware of your surroundings, especially like at Amazon, I've been able to find there's quirky patterns of people that, I had one, I don't even want to get into it, but once you start noticing patterns on people, it's kind of eye-opening. You almost think of yourself like a spy. And if you look at, I consider union busting and union formation almost forms of espionage, in that you're kind of secretly weaving together a network to take action and do something. So, you want to know who's on your side and who's not. And you start looking at people, or looking at the people around you as what's their motivation, what is coming out of their mouth. Now, when you guys did your drive, how many of your coworkers would spit the union busting lines at you? I mean, was that a pretty common thing? Were your other coworkers outspoken against you? Because that's always unusual to me when somebody speaks out, even if they don't agree with what you're doing it for the benefit of workers. So saying if you don't like it, leave is kind of antagonistic for somebody that's technically trying to help you. Were your coworkers antagonistic towards you when you did that?
Some of them, yes. And mind you, this was a really small... there's so much that goes into it. It was of course, it was much smaller than an Amazon facility. You're talking like, 25 people split up, you're talking about 25 people on a shift. Everybody knows each other pretty well. And for a lot of people that worked there, the company did this thing where they would make a point to hire a lot of formerly incarcerated people who didn't, and they paid like above the living wage for the area. So essentially what this company did was they would take a lot of vulnerable people who couldn't find better paying jobs elsewhere in the area, in a very expensive area. And so what ended up happening is, as people were being fed these talking points, they trusted them and took them verbatim, because this is how they made their living and survived. And like I said, there's more that goes into it. Like, if I could go back in time, I'd do a million things differently. We went into it with no organizing experience, and none of it. They organized it live. What?
I was going to say ditto. So you're not alone in that. If I could have gone, I did not. Let me tell you this. I didn't expect to be on a podcast talking about organizing a union or organizing at Amazon when I started working there, So, everybody's got that. You will look back, right? But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted you to know, I think everybody's got that. I wish I could go back to the beginning and map it all out perfectly from the start, but you don't always have that chance, right?
Yeah, well, and what I think it boils down to, I can sit and talk all day long about how those captive audience meetings really fucked everything up for us, and that really turned the tide, and that's part of why we lost so bad. But I think another really large aspect of it is a mistake that we made as organizers, and that it became this divisive back and forth with management about, hey, you're giving us this propaganda, this is nonsense, look at this half an article you gave us, this is ridiculous, instead of focusing on the material conditions in the workplace. So, instead of focusing on that and building that connection with people, it just became an argument with management. So that was where we kind of fell short with it.
If you can get them, if they can get you arguing with them, you're not talking to your coworkers, right?
Which is precisely what happened. Yes.
Right. I call that the tactical interference. They want to stop you from talking to your coworkers. At Amazon, I encounter this where, if I'm talking, I've seen this because I mostly work in one department. As I said, that was kind of a strategic decision to stay in. But occasionally I've gone to other departments, and it's kind of wild because and I've documented this. I've never used it for anything, but I wrote it down because I thought it was, these are the types of things that when you start noticing, these types of patterns, you write them down. It's kind of unusual. I would go to this one department, and I had friends in it because I have friends all over the facility. I'm a friendly guy. But I noticed that managers would, when I was assigned to this department, managers would come up and they'd make it a point to go up to the people I was talking to and kind of try to seemed like they were trying to find out what was going on. Because they'd see me talking to them, there was laughing, we were very open, and, they'd want to check in on that, right? I've experienced where I've had reps from HR kind of incognito in the workplace, not marked. Normally they wear vests or kind of like, at a certain position. They've been out sort of undercover, if you will, and they've seen me talking to people, and they'll come up, and it's kind of awkward because they'll just start talking to you about almost anything. When this happened with me, with one particular person, they came up and started talking about all these different kind of obscure policies and was not invited into the conversation necessarily, but seemed very focused on getting my attention on them and getting the other person's attention on them instead of me having their attention and talking to them. If they can disrupt that conversation. The same way they'll kick you out of I won an NLRB settlement because they kicked me out of a parking lot. Because, if they can just get you out of there, you're not going to talk to anybody. So the core of a lot of union busting strategies is to do that, is to disrupt your ability to communicate with other people. Take that impersonator Facebook account I've brought up before. That's a really good way to disrupt any potential communication between me and other people. And it's had that effect where people I've talked to people offline who are like, I didn't know if it was you or the other Drew that was saying this. So that's disrupting your message and your ability to talk to people. Same thing if they get you fighting them, like, come fight me, and then you don't pay any attention to your coworkers, right? That's tactical. And most people aren't going to, I think like that. It's almost predatory. You have to be thinking on that sort of scale and level of, what they know that the longer someone like you or me or somebody that believes in the union or the labor stuff talks to another person, the more of a chance we'll be able to get them on our side, so to speak. So they want to jam that up. And I've seen that they pulled a sort of Trump move here, or a Trump card, so to speak. I know that maybe has different connotations these days, but one of the Trump cards they played on us at Amazon was disconnecting our access to the inside of facilities off duty. That was something I forgot to mention. That the Amazon labor union did very well. They had an inside game and an outside game, where they had their tent outside, but they also basically ran a 24-hour station in the lunchroom and always had it staffed with people who would come in off duty and have those conversations. So they did away with that not too long ago, and that was just a blatant, to me, they did it for quote-unquote safety. But people aren't, I don't know, if you wanted the facilities to be safe, you put metal detectors up. There was a shooting that I reported on my TikTok today. I don't know if I've gotten the video up yet or not, but there was a shooting in Euclid, Ohio, where somebody came, I don't know the details, but this can happen in a big facility. And that, I think, is the concern, like, we don't want somebody off duty, but I don't believe someone came in off duty. People come in when they're coming. Violent acts happen at all times. The problem isn't that people are coming in off duty. It's the fact that you're not searching them for guns on the way in. Sorry, if that's kind of the way of the world when you have 5,000 people. That's a potential thing that can happen. But so that was their cover for what they did. But we all feel strongly that this was done. Maybe there's a safety component. In my experience, every good union busting maneuver, there's a little bit of truth and a little bit of actual concern, at least that they can present to people as the reason that they're doing it. But in the case of access risk, disconnecting our access to the inside of buildings, that has a really tough effect on one of the things I would have done was established a presence in my facility right away. That's what people like Amazonians United did. They would have potlucks. They would have things going on in the lunchroom. So now that winter's here, I can go outside and do events all the time, but being in the facility and being accessible. And again, there's that tactical interference where, they're interfering with your ability to form a union, right? And that's where the violation of the law comes in. So they have to find a way to cover it up with something else. but gee whiz, it sure seems to be a real slick way, or I would say a real slimy way, to disrupt organizing activities. It's fine though. We're going to figure out a way to slick it back into an advantage to us. But these things go back and forth as well. I think that's something that new organizers should remember too, is that it is a long game. I've been on the ground for 2 years at my facility, building up our network and establishing my ability or our ability to do what it is that we want. Whether that's just asking for higher wage, whether that's having rallies or getting petitions signed, or just trying to keep making TikTok videos to inform them of what they're doing wrong. That's protected, and that took a long time to establish that, and it did take a little bit of a fight at first. Like I said, I was kicked out of parking lots. I've gone to facilities and had the police called on me. But once they do something like that, they got a case on them if you report it to the NLRB. So when they call the police or they kick you out of the parking lot or something like that, they do something nasty, that's your opportunity to file an unfair labor practice charge and make sure that they understand that you're not messing around. I think that's important, and it paves the way for future actions. But yeah, I'm sorry, I got a bit of a ramble right there, but I am pretty upset about not being able to access the lunchrooms anymore, and that to me is just blatant union busting, as are other things. I kind of like doing protests though. I like getting kicked out of places. I suppose that's not a great feature, but I'm willing to do it if it's going to move the situation forward. So, and that ability to interact with your coworkers in an uninterfered way, that's what the National Labor Relations Act is all about. That's what the laws are designed to do, is give you the ability to communicate or to choose not to. That's fine too. And if somebody doesn't want to engage you, you don't have to press them. One of my favorite stories from the ALU drive comes from their executive director, or their executive secretary, Michelle. She said she walked by the vice president of the union for 2 months, never saying a word. I forget if he was outside or inside. Derek Palmer was the guy, and she just kept walking by. And after 2 months, she finally, kind of decided to talk to him. And then, she became part of the organizing crew. So, taking your time and being patient with people, I think, is a big part of it. I certainly appreciate people being patient with me. So I assume they appreciate it when you are with them as well.
To kind of wrap this up, I know that there's an Amazon organizing event coming up called Make Amazon Pay. We want you to tell us all about that and where listeners can go to follow information about this and what they can do to help. And
where they can go to follow you too, just so, if you want to plug your handle, go ahead on TikTok.
Certainly. Well, my TikTok, you can find me if you search Drew Duzinskis, DrewDuzinskis, but my handle is Dr. Dre Duzin, DrDreDuzin. Duzin, or Dre Duzin, or Dre Duzin is my handle on my badge at Amazon. That's my unique login. So that's how I troll them a little bit with that, Dr. Dre Duzin. But Make Amazon Pay is going to be an international series of actions, or a wave of actions that are you can go to makeamazonpay.com, and there's actually a map feature, and you can see all over the world there are organizations coming together from workers like myself. There are members of the community. There are advocates for different causes that have all targeted Amazon as a huge problem. And they're saying make Amazon pay its workers, make Amazon pay for the climate damage it's doing, make Amazon pay for taxes. That was the big one, and that's a common messaging for everybody. If you go to the Make Amazon Pay website, you can also create your own event or download a toolkit that you can use to create your own event. This is a very DIY thing. It's up to the individual's, ambition and initiative, what they want to do. We have workers that are going to be participating. At my facility in Joliet, I hear that Santa Claus is going to be making an appearance. I'm hoping I catch him at the event in Joliet on the 25th, Black Friday. Additionally, there are protests occurring all over the world and all over different sites. If you go to makeamazonpay.com, you can look it all up. And I encourage everybody to consider creating your own event and participating. And, let's build a strong labor movement, and let's build a strong labor movement designed to take down the beast that is Amazon. I hope that this becomes a yearly thing on Black Friday and we continue to move the situation forward. I think Amazon is a winnable fight for us, but only if we fight. My godfather and Michael Jordan used to say, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So if you're a worker at Amazon and you're thinking about doing this, or you think you want to get involved, you don't have to get anybody's permission. You don't have to work with any particular group of people. If you just want to get out there and make a difference, grab a clipboard, sign up for an event, and go try and see what you can do, because nobody's going to make this happen but you. And I encourage everybody to do that. Don't go looking for heroes. Start looking in the mirror. And that's what I hope the message is for people, that you can do this too. Anything that I've done, you can theoretically do. You may not feel like you can, but I assure you, if you really want to participate, you can go out there and make a difference. And I think that's what this Make Amazon Pay thing is for me, is bringing as many people together for a common cause to act collectively and make sure that Amazon does the right thing. They slime out of doing the right thing so much that we're going to have to get slick to counter them. And I hope that we do. So again, makeamazonpay.com and stay tuned. And be smart and be safe too. That's my normal sign off on the TikTok. Be smart, be safe, and stay tuned.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, Drew. We are really thankful that you took time out of your day to come talk to us. Like, we love your content. Your boy from Illinois. Like, I have your boy from Illinois on my podcast. Like, that's amazing. So, we will stay tuned.
I'm happy to be on the 4315 podcast.
You rock. It's
a win-win.
There we go. All right. We can't wait to hear more from you, and we'll keep our eyes open.
Yeah, thank you for coming on.
Okay.